Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 11 Yanks. And as you can see, we have a panel of guests here today. Filippo from Tactical Manager, who you all know. And for the first time, I think, on 11 Yanks, Sam from Yank Report, who most of you should know by now too. Super underrated channel. Not only fantastic content and opinions and ideas about all things USMNT, but also wins the award for best background on YouTube. Filippo is already disagreeing. Who's the
Yeah.
best then, Filippo?
He's the second best studio.
So who's the best? His white wall. Filippo's
Filippo.
white wall.
I had a feeling you were gonna say that, so I got a surprise for you. I rigged something up just for you. So for the first time ever, you can see the full
Wow.
Yank Report studio.
It is the
I still
mecca
think mine
of
is
soccer
better.
YouTube.
I still think mine is better.
It's a tremendous white wall you have there.
Your white wall is winning trophies left, right, and center, Filippo. If this was the Oscars, it would be best picture.
Simplicity is everything.
Indeed. Guys, we have a super exciting summer to talk about. A very successful summer in which we not only won 2 trophies, but we beat El Tri, our biggest rival, Mexico, in the final of both of them. And thus I thought this t-shirt would be appropriate for the occasion.
Apropos.
Guys, yes, very apropos. If you guys still want this t-shirt, it is on sale. You can go check it out in the link below. But guys, now that Gold Cup is finished, now that Nations League is finished, now that we've celebrated and we've had a few days to kind of step back and think about things, and now we can maybe look a little more objectively, right? And objectively, it was a great tournament, huge success. That being said, there's a lot to talk about and a lot to dig into. And I wanted to do that today and bring in Sam, because normally Filippo and I are here, but, an extra voice is always cool to have. And, I thought we could just start really with the Nations League. So we have 2 tournaments, and there were a lot of similarities in both of these teams. Would you agree in terms of the style of play and the spirit within the groups?
Yeah, most
Yeah.
of it. Just a talent difference, right? Besides
Right.
that, there's some.
Yeah, so there was a bit of a gap in talent, but that didn't stop, our quote unquote C team. Although there's some debate about that on Twitter today, from winning. And so let's dig into it and see what we can really pull away. Because no matter how successful you are, there are always lessons you can learn. There are always things we could have done better. And so we're gonna try and highlight both today. Let's start with the Nations League, okay, as the first tournament. And what we're going to do for this segment, guys, is each of us is going to give one, positive takeaway, all right? Or, a positive takeaway from the Nations League. And then after that, we're going to each offer one question mark. So something that, I don't want to call it negative, but maybe something we still have question marks about. Filippo, do you want to start with this one?
So I'll start the positive. I don't know if you want me to go positive and question mark or just positive. But
So we'll all do positive together, and then we'll swing back around and do question marks.
So to me, the main positive of Nations League that I've been going through my head right away, the first thing is the attitude of our stars right in the final. So a lot of these players are very young, and we were behind twice in that game against an experienced Mexican team. There was pressure. We were playing pretty much away. The crowd was Mexican for the most part. And I think that was a big positive. Those players didn't really feel the pressure. A lot of them, Giovanni Reina played with an attitude, Weston McKennie, even Pulisic calling the penalty kick, shushing the fans at the end. So I think the attitude of those stars, which I had some questions in regards to that before the tournament. I think you remember me saying that. I was like, if we fall behind Mexico, I don't know if we can come back. And Pulisic shushed the Mexico crowd. He shushed me at the same time with that. And the players' attitude was something important, and we're going to need it. We're going to need it in World Cup qualifying and World Cup after we qualify.
Yeah, for sure. It really felt like a moment, I think, of coming of age for that team, right? Where Pulisic and Reina and McKennie, who are 3 of the stars, stepped up big time in that final, right? Although we maybe didn't have the best game, and I don't think we outplayed Mexico, they stepped up when it counted, and that's huge for a bunch of, Pulisic and McKennie aren't really kids anymore. They're going to be 23 in September, but for Reina, probably our best attacker of the tournament at 18 years old. Huge moment, and it was really, them putting their stamp and saying, this is our team now, okay?
Yeah, and that was my number 1 as well, man. I had Gio Reyna written down as someone that just sort of came to life in that Nations League tournament. I mean, we've all been watching him pretty much grow up at Borussia Dortmund for so long. But seeing him represent the U.S. in really his first competitive matches, both against Honduras and against Mexico, I mean, I didn't realize that he had that kind of fight in him. Like, nobody really knew what he was going to do under that pressure, and just watching him rise up to that was incredible. But I'll pick my number 2 thing that I was going to say, because Filippo kind of took mine, which I'm glad we're on the same page with that. And my second thing was Gregg being pragmatic. Because I think this is the first time we've seen in the Mexico final specifically that we've seen so many times, like in that 2019 Nations League Gold Cup final, that Gregg like stuck to his guns and just refused to kind of move away from the possession and the system and all that. And then in the Nations League final, we see him come out in this different lineup with this different formation and allow the players to kick it long and, defend and play that kind of classic United States style that we kind of are used to. So that was like the big thing that I took away from that. Like, I guess this dude might be a little bit more flexible than I've given him credit for previously.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, Sam. We've seen in the past, like you said, Gregg maybe not be as flexible as a lot of us wanted him to. And I think over the course of this summer, we've seen more flexibility from him than we usually have, which is huge, right? You have to be flexible.
Yeah, that was one of the major criticisms against him, and that was the first time that I really saw, like, okay, so this is a thing that happens with Gregg in big games. Okay.
Yeah.
By starting Tim Ream, remember?
Yeah. So let's touch on that a little bit, because in the Mexico final, we have, the image, I think, when most people of that final is Pulisic shushing the crowd, Horvath saving the penalty, these great moments. But when I went back and watched the game, they really targeted that spot between Tim Ream and Serginho Dest. And it's almost like they knew that was a weakness. And although we were pressing them. So, Sam, you said that he allowed us to be more ourselves, more a classic American style. I agree with you, but I think he added a caveat to that. So instead of just sitting back and bunkering, he played Reyna, Sargent, and Pulisic very narrow and said, guys, press them. And so often that forced Edson Alvarez back into the pocket to try and build out of the back, and they were being pressed. The problem was when they would be pressed, I felt like oftentimes they would get the ball into that channel between Tim Ream and Serginho Dest, and that caused us a lot of problems throughout the night, and it finally culminated in Diego Lainez taking advantage of that area and scoring a goal. Question for you, Filippo. Was that Gregg being pragmatic, or do you think Gregg could have done something differently in that final with his back three?
So I think what he was thinking was that Tata Martino would exploit our fullbacks, right? So he tried to do 3 in the back to cover for it. I don't know what he was thinking when he put Tim Ream to do any coverage. Clearly it didn't work. Dest was a little shell of himself throughout the game. I don't think essentially that was – I understand Sam's positive and actually agree with him that Gregg being flexible and trying something different is a positive. I don't think the tactics for that game specifically were a positive. We also barely created an open play in that game. We're mostly dominated by Mexico. And at the end of the day, set pieces and individual talents is what saved us in that match. We have to recognize and give Mexico credit where it was due. And Tata Martino's in-game management was also better than Gregg's throughout the game. I think Gregg did it to cover the fullbacks. It just didn't really work quite how he wanted, probably.
So would you have preferred to see maybe Mark McKenzie over there on the left and then Matt Miazga on the right?
It would have been better for sure. I'm pretty sure Diego Lainez would have not scored on Matt Miazga or McKenzie, especially Miazga. We know that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we do. So I'm going to go and talk about my real positive was Gregg making us very dominant without the ball, right? Oftentimes when we talk about dominance, we think about possession. We think about attacking. We think about shots on goal. And we've been very soft defensively over the course of Gregg's tenure. I thought that in the Nations League, we started to be dominant without the ball. And that can mean defensively. It can mean in the high press. I thought we mostly did a good job of pressing them high, but then quickly retreating into a low block when they broke our press, right? Which that will happen. And that's the danger of a high press. If they break through it, how do you react? I thought that Gregg had, it was really over the course of the summer, but I thought
Yeah.
from the Nations League, we became a team that was dominant without the ball. And that's a concept that I don't think people give enough credit for, is you're defending and you're set up when you do not have the ball, which was a thing that America's been, as an identity for a long time, right? But we added a caveat. America's always been, in the past, we've been, defending in a low block, bunker for our lives, try to hit them on counterattacks and set pieces. Now, we did that very much this summer, but we added the wrinkle of we're also now a high pressing team, which I don't think the U.S. has ever been, largely because I don't think we had the players to do it, and largely because I don't think coaches had the courage to try it, And so often you could see Gregg on the sidelines urging his players forward without the ball to try and press and squeeze Mexico high. And I thought that was a real positive takeaway from the Nations League.
Can I add one thing to that? There's
Yeah.
one thing that I wanted to ask you in regards to that. So I know we did notice that difference in the U.S., but how worried are you still about Gregg when he puts our lineup high and how we defend in transition? Because a lot of times we were out of position there, especially Nations League against Honduras. It was completely noticeable, especially against Honduras.
Yeah. So it's a good question. I thought Honduras was more of a personnel problem, okay? Because if you have a midfield that includes Sebastian Legette and Jackson Ewell, neither of those guys are defensive warriors on the ball, and you're going to be vulnerable, right? And so in that game, yeah, I thought we were. And you could see McKennie and Acosta for the Mexico game be a lot more solid defensively. But again, the problem was not that Mexico played as much through midfield. The problem is that Mexico bypassed midfield oftentimes and just tried to hit the channel. I still have questions, of course, about how we defend in transition. I think Tyler Adams answers a lot of those questions.
Yeah.
I do think there's room for either a 3-5-2, right, which would help us a little bit defensively in transition, or a 4-2-3-1 with a double pivot. The problem so often is that Gregg wants our fullbacks high, and in a 4-3-3, that leaves you with two center backs and a 6. And I think in CONCACAF that will probably be fine, but we're not going to have a lot of time before the World Cup to work on a system that allows us to be better, in transition, defending transitions, if we don't work on it in World Cup qualifying. Like, World Cup qualifying is both, you have to qualify, but also we do need to see more defending in transition during World Cup qualifying. And part of that has to be shape when you have the ball, with a mind to what are you going to do when you lose the ball, So that's something I definitely want to see more of.
I'm kind of transitioning into the negatives here, or the worries, but getting into personnel, so much of that was when we had Jackson Ewell back there at the 6, and his just inability to cover it all. And also in the Nations League, we had McKenzie back there playing next to Brooks, and while he did an okay job, I'm not sure that he really had that range to cover Brooks in all situations, and seeing players emerge that we'll get to later that have a lot more of that athleticism, I think, are going to help out in those situations where we're getting stretched.
Yeah. I think Brooks, people talk about Brooks as this great defender, and he certainly is, okay? But Brooks has issues defending 1v1, okay?
Yeah.
If he gets caught on an island, if he gets caught in isolation, he can be beat very, very easily, which is why the Serginho Dest experiment, on the left, may not work from a defensive perspective.
And that was my big question mark coming out of there, was Serginho Dest, that left side. Just, we talked about the fight of players like McKennie and Reyna early on. We didn't see that from Dest during the Nations League. He had all this promise coming in as this Barcelona player. We just got so little out of him on the defensive side of the ball at all that continues to be a question mark for me moving forward, knowing that he's definitely going to be a part of this team, but how does he fit in? Because I don't really see him as either like a Shaq Moore type player or a Sam Vines type player that we saw in Nations League. I don't see him doing either of those roles. He's going to be a lot more advanced and a lot more penetrating. So like how does the formation, the system, whatever, evolve to get the most out of this guy? Because we're definitely going to need him.
Is that one of the question marks?
Yeah, that was my question mark.
What was yours? So I'll catch on to his, because it's gonna feed mine.
Yeah.
Mine is my question mark when I left Nations League is whether Gregg Berhalter will build a team on a system that he wants, and he's going to force players upon that system, or is he going to build a system to try to feed specific players that maybe are the best out of the ones we got? So maybe a system where you fit in Pulisic and Reina, right? Or no, I'm going to have this system, and they have to figure out their way in it.
Right.
And again, if you're going to play with center backs like Brooks per se, he can't be the one covering a fullback, right? That's not what you want. You need more defensive fullbacks. And do we have that? So is that the right system? And we saw a lot of the times Gregg insist in a system that wasn't proper for the players he had in the lineup. We
Yeah.
saw him do that. And we saw that on Gold Cup as well, despite a lot of positives that we're going to talk about. We saw him do that again in Gold Cup. So that is a question mark I actually have in regards to Gregg. And I know everyone right now, we're in the honeymoon phase, right? Because we won 2 trophies. And I love it that we won 2 trophies, especially because I had a lot in stake in Twitter, right, with the L3 fans. Um, but my thing is, we can't stay in the honeymoon phase forever, right? We need to question these things. And Gregg has been trying to put a system over the players. And I've seen that. I've seen that happen very often to many different teams, and it doesn't usually work well. You usually try to work with the players, especially in the national team level,
Yeah.
where you have so many different options that you can call up. And the U.S. has a lot of options nowadays. You do need to build around the qualities that you have, and certain players have to be there. And Gregg has to figure that out eventually.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. I think that's, like we talked about in the positives, it was encouraging that we saw Gregg have moments where he wasn't, so tactically inflexible. We can only hope that that continues into World Cup qualifying, because reality is oftentimes in CONCACAF, your mistakes don't get punished, right? Teams don't have the quality to punish a poor system or a system that has frailties or vulnerabilities. When we get to a World Cup, those teams will punish you. We saw it against Switzerland playing at 70% intensity, right? We started off well, but we were vulnerable in lots of areas, and Switzerland punished us, and that's not even a top team in the world. That's Switzerland. So you're 100% right. We are going to have to continue to tweak this system. And what you just said kind of feeds into my big question mark is, how are we going? I talked about us being very dominant without the ball, and that is going to take us so far. But if we truly want to be an elite team, a team that competes with the best in the world, which I believe we're on track to do, at least with our player pool, we have to also find a way to be dominant with the ball. And in both Nations League and in Gold Cup, we failed to create chances, right? Meaningful chances on a consistent basis. And particularly from open play, from midfield, we failed to create meaningful chances. And I think that's both a personnel problem. I think it's a system problem, like Filippo said. And I'm encouraged that Berhalter can and has shown the willingness to tweak his system. And hopefully we will see more of that in World Cup qualifying. But I think that is something we should all be on the lookout for.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right, let's hop into the Gold Cup now. So, Gold Cup, what are your positive takeaways? Obviously, we won, but, outside of
that was pretty nice.
Winning was awesome.
That was all right.
Sam, what was your positive takeaway from the Gold Cup?
I think my positive takeaway was this return of like what I'm going to define as the American spirit, because it seemed like that left for a long period of time, and seeing that, like, players like Kellen Acosta just fight so hard, seeing players like George Bello come in the final and just give everything he had down that left flank. I mean, there was numerous occasions where it seemed like the U.S. was in an absolute dogfight. I mean, the last 4 games of the tournament were just all were dogfights, and just seeing that the players dig deep and find something inside them to prevail in this crazy tournament under these crazy circumstances, with COVID looming, and with half the team is looking at getting transferred. Half the team has like transfer rumors during the tournament. There's players with injuries, there's players with preseason, but somehow like they found a way to bring that together and return with that fight and claw and energy that I was part of the U.S. men's national team that I fell in love with. So seeing that return to the team was my favorite takeaway of this Gold Cup.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'm gonna go with the positive of Gold Cup. To me, is something that it's actually Gregg to a certain extent. It's Gregg's group management, right? It's a little bit of what Sam pretty much said. So he showed that fighting spirit in Nations League, and then we showed it again in Gold Cup, and the unity that you talked about, togetherness that you talked about a lot, Pete. And again, when that happens with two different groups, it's most likely the coach, the coaching staff, the management.
Yeah.
So his group management has to be given credit. That's something I don't question Gregg right now, at least. It seems like when it comes to having the players fight for him and play for the country and be together, it seems like, and even the Matthew Hoppe situation, right? They had a little issue during the game when he was subbed out. They figured it out. They're together again. They're happy. So I think that's a big positive. But the biggest positive of all of them is just that El Tri is finished.
Expound on that, if you will, Filippo.
So let's look into it. They lose Nations League to the United States A squad, right? And they brought their A squad as well. That's okay because they're facing all these high quality players, a Champions League winner, Giovanni Reina, Weston McKennie, even players like DeAndre Yedlin that are competitive players that played in Premier League. So far so good. But now they come into Gold Cup and they test a little bit of their depth, right? They're missing some players, but at the same time, they bring some of their A squad members. They like to hear this or not. They had A squad members there, and they face a U.S. men's national team where most likely, maybe none of the players that were there are starters right now. Maybe we could argue maybe Matt Turner might be a starter. It wouldn't hurt to have him, so that's okay. Maybe we'll see Matthew Hoppe at the 9, but Gregg didn't show any indication. So maybe none of those players are starters. Zero. And they lose in the final. And it doesn't matter if the United States was outplayed, right? You lose twice right there. And then you go to the Olympics where Mexico goes along and loses in the semifinals, and they're claiming they lost to Brazil. And yeah, they in fact did lose to Brazil, but Brazil is missing a lot of key players in that Olympic team as well. While Mexico has their best U23. They're only missing Edson Alvarez in the Olympics because he was denied going in Arteaga. So I don't, okay, again, finished seems almost like an exaggeration. What I mean by O3 is their reign of CONCACAF is gone, and they didn't grow with the United States. We outgrown them, and I think the United States hasn't reached its potential yet.
No.
So we're the kings of CONCACAF now, and it's probably going to be like that forever now.
I appreciate the joy that you have whenever you're speaking about the demise of El Tri. But in defense of El Tri, I will say that if Jimenez gets back on this team and he returns to the form that he was in before his injury, I mean, that's a different squad because then you've got that fantastic striker up there along with all their great wing options. And we saw in the Nations League final that lacking that striker in the middle was just a really tough thing for them that they never really overcame throughout the tournament. And then the Funes Mori experiment and all that. So pending Jimenez returning to form, I don't know if we're quite done with El Tri yet.
That's a big if, though.
Yeah, that is a tremendous if. I mean, that injury he suffered was awful.
The guy's not looking the same at Wolves right now. Not looking. He looked like he lost a lot of weight. He might be. Remember, CONCACAF's very physical. They'll bully him. We don't know how he's going to be. That's a big if. While the United States right now, and again, Jimenez is 30. I'm talking about in the future as well.
True.
They're how are they going to compete with us in 5 years when Mr. Jimenez is gone, Hector Herrera is gone, Lozano's over 30, Tecatito's like going to be like 30, 2026, for example. This new generation they have, as much as they think 24-year-olds are prospects, those are not prospects.
No.
So I just think they haven't realized the damage they've done to their soccer team by holding players hostage in Liga MX over the years, while the United States is sending them to Europe. They don't care.
Hey, that is not fair. They sent Rodolfo Pizarro to Miami, so they are exporting players, Filippo.
True. And they're trying to get Legette now, apparently.
Yeah. Look, El Tri is going to be an interesting one. It's not just can Raul Jimenez come back, okay? You know, Talavera and Ochoa, their two top keepers, are in their mid to late 30s.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Hector Moreno is 33. Chaco Rodriguez, 30. Guardado, 34. Jonah Dos Santos and Hector Herrera, 31, 32. You know, a lot of their squad that has carried them for the last 10 years is in their 30s. And the players that they are bringing up, while there are some good players there, they're not of the same ilk. And And, can JJ Macias, he was the big guy, right? That was going to take over that number 9. He's now in Getafe. We'll have to see how he does. Diego Lainez shows some promise, but you certainly don't see the same level of talent across the board, you know what I mean, as you're seeing in the U.S. being taken to Europe and exporting players and improving. We just don't see that from Liga MX, apart from a few here and there. So I think, Filippo, El Tri is not finished as a good team, but you're right that they're finished as the kings of CONCACAF.
Absolutely.
They may win a game or two here and there, but the idea that now the U.S. is below them is just not true. We've proven that twice now.
Next is Azteca. We're coming.
That'll be very interesting, right? That's the other thing. We haven't played outside of the U.S. competitively yet, right? Since COVID, so we have to see how we deal with that, and that will be very telling. And that's where I think the fight, the togetherness, the mentality is going to come in and play a key factor. I have 2 positives, and I can't really decide which one, so I'm just going to go with both. The first one is our fitness levels in Gold Cup. We were the fittest team in the Gold Cup, and I think that was very obvious throughout because we didn't always play well. Oftentimes we were outplayed, but toward the end of games, teams struggled. In fact, in all 3 knockout games, we scored goals after the 75th minute.
Absolutely.
Right, to win 1-0.
After substitutions.
After the opponent clearly was tiring. Qatar was the biggest example of it for me. Just how much they lost their ability to run and to press and to close down space, and then that allowed us to build momentum, and then bang. I think that's because most of that MLS team is mid-season, right? Their fitness levels are at their peak, whereas a lot of these other teams are not. And I think that carried us a long way. That's a huge positive. It's also a question of, if everybody had the same level of fitness, would we have gone quite as far? And I suppose we won't know the answer to that. But the fact that we brought, a squad that was fit enough to be pressing Mexico in the 117th minute of a final was amazing, And the other one is Gregg embracing his inner bad boy. I love that from Gregg, whether it was him, making faces at the referee after we scored the little, or whether it was him, before the Mexico game, calling out the Mexican players for their choking antics, or during the Mexico game, swearing at our players. There was a clip I saw of, a goal kick that Mexico had early in the game. It was actually the 1v1 Paul Arriola chance that he hit the post. The team was sort of, they weren't high pressing. They were in sort of a mid block. And Gregg was yelling at them, "Let's effing go," and pushing them up the field. And it was that pressure that actually won the ball back that created that opportunity. And Gregg being so, American soccer coaches, and if you've done your coaching license here, they want you to be very vanilla, right? They want you to do it the right way, and then they want you to sit down and watch the game and take notes and be very polite in your interactions. And I just don't think that's realistic if you want to be a champion. If you want to be the best in the world, you have to take advantage of not intimidating, but competing with your opponents on a psychological level. And there's so many ways to do that. So seeing Gregg do that was amazing.
Also, to add to that, something that happens very often, a lot of the times what the coaches do is they're pressing the ref. And remember, the ref is a human being. If you keep pressing him, bothering him, he's a human right there. And you see that very often on away games. The ref will make mistakes for the crowd to help the home team. That's all right here. So if Gregg is pressing the ref and doing what Gregg did, I called him CONCACAF Gregg. CONCACAF Gregg.
Yeah.
So if we have CONCACAF Gregg throughout the qualifiers, it is a win for us. It's an extra player almost right there, complaining with the ref, bothering. That we need that, and
playing mind games, right?
Yeah.
Playing mind games. That's huge, and that's, I think, something that played into the Gold Cup a lot. All right.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard in the press and we've heard the players talk about like how together this group is and just how much everybody loves each other and everybody fights. We've heard Gregg refer to the group many times, but Gregg has been so vanilla throughout his tenure that like this is the first time, like you said, we've seen him open up and show a little bit of that personality. And I think that explains, like Filippo was saying, about managing the group. Whenever you have players that maybe didn't start the tournament or maybe started the tournament and were pulled early, and then you get called upon to do a job later on, that you're still locked in and focused. I made the point about George Bello earlier, where he got that one appearance against Martinique and then wasn't called upon again, and then got asked to come in, and there wasn't that lamenting about not getting a starting opportunity or not being more part of the tournament. He was still locked in and focused, and I think a lot of that is that commitment to the coach that Gregg Berhalter is behind the scenes, the guy that we don't get to see. So yeah, that's a great point, and that was a fantastic point about MLS being in mid-season. I didn't get an opportunity to tell you that. I never thought about that. That speaks volumes. Yeah,
for sure. Let's hop into the questions from the Gold Cup, and I think this is going to be an interesting one, because despite the fact that we won, we almost never really played that well throughout the tournament, right? We were oftentimes outplayed. We often failed to create chances, but I don't want to step on anybody's points. Sam, what was your big question mark?
I think my big question mark was the eights position coming from this tournament. Going in, Sebastian Legette is supposed to be our guy, supposed to be the starter, and I don't think I'm telling you guys any news right now whenever I say he didn't have the greatest tournament. He didn't exactly have the tournament of a player that's supposed to be on our A team. And then kind of looking at the roster as a whole, Yunus Musa is got this injury and might not be available for qualifying. And then, Busio came in with all the hype. There was some hype around Eric Williamson. We didn't see much of Williamson throughout this tournament. What we saw was pretty good, but it's not enough for me to say, that's a guy that I trust in World Cup qualifying 100%. Busio seems like he's got a lot of room to grow. And then outside of those guys, whenever you look at the roster as a whole, there's a lot of guys who aren't exactly proven. There's guys like Luca De La Torre, who has had minimal who's been around the group very little, guys like Julian Green, who hasn't been around the group a lot. So I feel like I came away asking questions about that position group. What are we going to do about that moving forward? That's the group that I'm most concerned about going into World Cup qualifying.
Yeah, do you have any thoughts on that, Filippo?
Yeah, so I didn't have many question marks on the eights in this tournament. I got confirmations. At first, Busio wasn't even going to be an 8 for us. He started as a 6, and then Gregg moved him after he got bullied, playing as a deep-lying playmaker. Legette, to me, before the tournament, shouldn't be in the A squad. Many people might disagree. I just didn't think he should have been there. And like Sam said, we pretty much got proof of it, I think. It was more of proof than doubt on Sebastian Legette. I think we have many options for the 8 outside of the players here, and I'm not overly worried about it. We have Weston McKennie, we have Yunus Musa, De La Torre can play at the 8, Julian Green can play at the 8. God, I even wish Reyna played at the 8 for us, right? In that role. And we even, so I think Caden Clark later on can even play that 8, pressing 8, like dual 8 position, attacking. What Legette was doing essentially, but better.
Yeah.
So do you want me to tell you my question mark, or do you want to talk about this?
Can we quickly just talk about Sebastian Legette? Because he is a guy who oftentimes, he's polarizing, right? Mm-hmm. There are fans who will say, he's not great, but he does a job. And oftentimes my question is, what is the job that he does? Because for me, if your job is to cycle the ball sideways and backwards, that's not good enough as an 8. As an 8, I need to see you creating chances. I need to see you being a creator, being somebody who can play when time and space is compressed, who can penetrate on the dribble with your passing. And Gregg said before this tournament that we know, Legette is a guy that has goals and assists in him. But in both tournaments, he played 7 games, no goals, 1 assist. So does he really do enough to justify that position at the 8? I know he can pass the ball sideways, and I know he can pass the ball backwards, and I know that occasionally he'll get forward and maybe win the ball like he did against Mexico and pass it over to Paul Arriola. But is that enough compared to the options we have to justify his place in the team, or is he a Berhalter favorite?
Berhalter favorite.
What are your thoughts, Sam?
Yeah, I always kind of push back on the Berhalter favorite thing because we've seen him move away from so many so-called favorites. In this tournament, for instance, Jackson Ewell was a Berhalter favorite that he was never going to move away from, and he did move away from him. I think we just haven't seen players play in that position effectively enough to like get him out. I think that's coming. Now, a great counterpoint to that is many players haven't gotten time because Gregg's been playing Legette there. So I do understand that aspect of it. But yeah, I think Legette is that player in the squad right now that we gotta. Once he gets out of the squad, once we get 4 guys who are clearly better than him that can do the job, and we don't need his leadership or experience anymore, I think we're going to be in a much better position.
So, Sam, when you talk about Berhalter being willing to bench his favorites, I would argue, and tell me if you agree, that he only benches his favorites when playing them becomes completely indefensible. For example, USMNT Twitter is divided on a lot of things, right? But everyone agreed that Jackson Ewell and Jonathan Lewis should not have been in this roster. You found almost nobody who would push back against that. And yet they were there, taking up 2 of 23 spots. Mm-hmm. And yet they started that first game. And it was so indefensible to ever start them again that Berhalter finally got rid of them. We saw this with Dan Lovitz and Will Trapp. Eventually he moves away from them. But in my opinion, it's too slow and too late.
Yeah, that's a solid criticism that it's too slow and too late. He will do it eventually, though. Whenever it becomes obvious. I will say, in defense of Jackson Ewell, whenever he first got into the squad, he had like 1 or 2 decent games that people were like, maybe this guy could potentially serve a need on the national team, and he's just fallen off, man. He's completely fallen off. I mean, he's been an absolute shell of himself for the last, what do you want to say, like 2 years. And I really hope that now that Ewell is not going to be in the national team picture, that he can, like, now that the spotlight's off a little bit, that he can come back to the player that he was, because he has just not been good at all.
I think with Jackson Ewell, what happens very often is in MLS, the easiest position to play is the 6 in MLS. It's probably one of, obviously there's more debate on it, but you have so much time and space that if you play as a deep line playmaker in MLS, and we saw that with Busio too. Busio tricked me, right? He tricked me because in MLS when he plays as a 6, he has so much time and space. And I was even talking to Pete, and Pete was saying, "Oh, I wonder when he gets bullied." I'm like, "No, man. In MLS, I saw it. He was doing so well at the regista role. Looked like I was going to say." But then you see it in a physical game where the 6 is not that. 6 is actually one of the toughest positions to play in the world. The 6. We've seen legendary players like Andrea Pirlo execute it very well, the regista role. But Busio in MLS tricked me because it seemed like he could do it, but you can't. It's the same thing with Jackson Ewell, and I think we've all at one point fallen victim of it. But Jackson Ewell just can't play when time and space are compressed, like Pete said here already before.
And I think not only did Berhalter move away from Ewell, but he moved away from the idea of a deep-lying playmaker 6 entirely, because he went to Kellen Acosta and didn't really ask him to really serve that role.
Yeah, it was need-based. We might see something like that shift. It's just that I don't know. He saw that he couldn't put Busio or Ewell when we're playing a team that we have to defend for our lives in Gold Cup, essentially, which is what we did. He needed a ball-winning midfielder, and then Acosta did his thing, right, to shut my mouth a little bit, at least for the tournament.
Well, so this then brings up the discussion of system over a personnel, right? Because if you look at our 2 best 6s at the moment, it's arguably Adams and Acosta, right? Both of whom fit more of the ball-winning 6 instead of the regista type 6. And so Gregg then, like you said, Sam, when Ewell first joined the national team, we thought, oh, maybe this guy has something. And I think part of that was that his competition was Michael Bradley or Will Trapp, because Adams was injured for about a year, remember? And so we were like, well, we'll take Ewell of those 3 options, But now that there are better options, and I think we'll see this with a lot of the player pool too, as there are better options. And this kind of feeds into my question mark is, can Berhalter be ruthless when it matters? We are heading into a period in the U.S. men's national team when good players, great players won't make the roster simply because we have so much talent. Now, during World Cup qualifying, it might not be as pronounced because you can bring bigger rosters, 30, 28, whatever. But as we get towards Qatar, good players won't be in Qatar. Now, I hope that Berhalter can be ruthless enough, because here's what happens. When you work with a player for a long time, you trust this player. You have a relationship with this player. You have memories of winning trophies with this player, right? it's easy for you to have to overlook that player's weaknesses in favor of who that guy is. Your relationship, your memories, your fondness for what he brings to the table, that you sometimes overlook that there are better players there. Can Berhalter be ruthless when it matters, whether that's in World Cup qualifying or beyond, to say, I know you've won trophies for me before, I know you've done good things for us before, but this guy's better. And so ultimately, it's evolution. It's constant adaptation and change, and the weak don't survive. And maybe some people are uncomfortable with that idea, but that's what being a world-class soccer nation means. How many world-class players don't make it onto Italy's roster or France's roster? Or look at Jadon Sancho, one of the best wingers, in probably the world, sat on England's bench for most of the Euros.
Mm-hmm.
That pretty much adds up. You're saying, let's say Caden Clark arrives at Leipzig and is playing. Does he take Legette out, and the guy that
Right.
has memories? That one I agree. And I didn't. You want me to say my question right now?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's gonna get some people here are gonna get pissed off on it because of recency bias. Not you guys. Mostly some viewers.
I'm just excited, man. I'm ready for this. I don't know what's coming, but I'm fired up.
My question mark is Kellen Acosta.
Okay.
My question mark is Kellen Acosta, because we've seen so many different versions of Kellen Acosta. We've seen a player that pretty much at one point loses the game for us, right?
Yeah.
He's one of the reasons we lose. And then we've seen a Kellen Acosta that is the reason we won, right? Against a tough Mexican side. So my question is Kellen Acosta. From here on, what is it going to be? Is it going to be inconsistency? Is it going to be always good, always bad? What are we going to get from Acosta? Was this just a hot streak, or is this the actual confident Acosta? What are we getting from this guy in the future? That's my question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that leads in a little bit to what Pete was talking about, is like, how's Gregg going to treat Kellen Acosta, the hero of the Gold Cup? And Gregg's got a big decision on his hands about being ruthless right now about that goalkeeper situation, because it's interesting. Throughout our lineup, it seems like so many of there's like a great player that's undeniable, and then like some other guys behind him. Like you got Pulisic and you got Brennan Aronson, you got Reyna, and then you've got Tim Weah. You got Tyler Adams and you got Kellen Acosta, Serginho Dest, and whoever else you want to play. But suddenly this this goalkeeper situation is a genuine issue. You've got three guys that have performed. That have won tournaments, you can say. And I told Caleb Adams this whenever I spoke to him the other day. I think if you go with Horvath or you go with Steffen, and one of those guys gives up a goal, and there's a chance that a keeper could have saved it, the fan base is going to lose their minds, saying if Turner was in there, he would have saved that. And it's hard to argue with that, given what we've seen with Matt Turner. So, I agree with Pete, and I'm curious to see how that situation is going to get handled. And if you sit the Man City guy, is there going to be an issue within the team, within the locker room? How is he going to handle that? It's going to be really interesting, and this is the first real time we've seen Gregg have to deal with that.
Yeah, and I think also with the goalkeeper situation, it's like, how are you going to play? Okay, because Gregg did a fantastic job with both Acosta and with Turner in this tournament, and said, listen, he allowed them to play to their strengths. Turner's strengths are his shot stopping. Right? We very rarely saw him play out of the back under pressure, right? We saw it early on. There was some clear shakiness there. And then, we didn't see it after that. So very clearly that was Gregg saying, okay, don't worry about under pressure. We can just go long and we'll win second balls. We have the athleticism to do that. And with Acosta, he didn't make him play out of the back under pressure as much as a six. He allowed him to be more of a ball winning six. And if we're going to do that, as we go forward, how are we going to play? Who's the personnel? Those are the big sort of question marks for Gregg. Can he be ruthless? 100%.
And the big counterpart to that is, did you feel like Steffen in the Nations League showed that he's so great with the ball at his feet that it supersedes the shot stopping of Matt Turner?
No, and not only that, Steffen wasn't great as a shot stopper either. He saved some good shots, but he needed Josh Sargent to bail him out when he came off his line and completely whiffed on a cross. We may not have even been in the final, right?
Yeah.
And then the question too is Horvath going to play? Because Horvath is very good with his feet, at least from what I saw. is he going to play? Is Stefan going to play? Gregg's got some interesting decisions to make. And for me, I'd probably be comfortable with any of the three if he puts them in. I'd probably go Horvath if I'm Gregg, but I'd be fine with any of them starting, honestly. This brings us into our last sort of section of the night, and that is really a stock up, stock down. I want to talk about 6 players who raised their stock over the summer and 6 players who lowered their stock. Let's start with those who lowered their stock so we can kind of end on a high. Who wants to start? We'll go 2 each.
Do you want me to go with 2 or do one?
Do one, and then we'll circle back.
I think I'm going to go with a player that many might not have thought of. I think Luca de la Torre stock went down a little bit. Not because he played, but because he didn't play and other guys played, right? So we talked about Kellyn Acosta or whatever. I think Luca de la Torre's stock went down a little bit for sure. And probably not just among the fan base, because many did not like the fact that he rejected the call, essentially, right? He came out and spoke about it. And I don't think Gregg liked it, probably. I don't think Gregg was a big fan. Will Gregg not call him up because of that? I don't think so, if De La Torre is doing very well. But the thing with De La Torre is he's playing for Heracles. He's not playing for Barcelona. That if he rejects it, Gregg's going to go, man, this guy's a Barcelona guy. I can't. It's Heracles. So it's not like he's playing on the biggest club not even Ajax, right? It's an average Dutch league club. So I think his stock went down for this summer.
But my counterpoint to that is the fact that we lacked so much creativity in midfield may have been something that actually improves his stock.
Yeah, and what I said earlier about, if Yunus Musa is out injured, who are your 4/8s? And if you're trying to figure that out right now, how do you not include Luca de la Torre in that? I have no idea.
Yeah. Put it this way. I want him in World Cup qualifying, but if Gregg doesn't bring him in, I won't be mad. Because like you said, if you turn down a national team, a Gold Cup, when you're on the fringes of the national team, this was your chance to come in and win your spot, and you turned it down, you can't really be too mad when, you're not called up again.
But you guys got to remember, we're talking about stocks down in regards to what happened. Yeah, we lack creativity, but is Gregg not going to call up Legette? He'll call up Legette.
Oh, Legette's going to be 100%. He's
going to be one of them. Weston McKennie will be there. Tyler Adams will be there. Julian Green is back in Bundesliga. If he's playing, we could see Julian Green back there. There's options, and Kellyn Acosta also pretty much secured his spot at the midfield at this point as well. I think De La Torre's stock could have gone higher if he played because he's a more creative player. So it went down, and I think he might not be called up in September because of that.
Man, with the expanded rosters that we're going to be able to bring in qualifiers, I just don't see how that happens, at least right now, unless, the season starts and Tanner Tessman turns into Xavi out there for Venetia or something like that,
Yeah.
That's my thoughts on De La Torre at the moment.
Okay. Who's your stock down, Sam?
My stock down is going to be Matt Miazga. Matt Miazga played very little during the Nations League. He's a center back that has limited range and mobility, so pairing him with John Brooks is already an issue. And then in the Gold Cup, we saw fantastic performances from Miles Robinson. We also saw some good and some bad from James Sands, but if Berhalter elects to go with a 3 in the back, James Sands is a fantastic option. And then we saw Walker Zimmerman be not the he was pretty good until he went down. I feel like him leaving that Canada game really changed the tournament for the U.S. on its head. So with Richards coming back and McKenzie showing himself that he's a viable option, I think Matt Miazga took a big hit this summer.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sam. I agree. And I think the other thing about Miazga is he's a little unreliable, right? He'll defend well and then make a pretty bad mistake, and that's something he's going to have to clean up out of his game, or just do something stupid off the ball that gets him sent off, or
Yeah.
Stock down. This is going to be a tough one. I'm going to say Daryl Dike. I think his stock went down this summer. I think a lot of people after 2 friendlies, or 2 goals in a friendly against Costa Rica were ready to anoint him as Josh Sargent's replacement. And then, after 2 goals against Martinique, people were ready to hand him the captain's armband, the coaching job, everything, starter for life. And I think Filippo, this is something you've talked about for a long time, even when he was, doing really well over in England, that he's technically very limited. A lot of people think he's Josie Altidore. But Josie in his day was not bad technically.
Oh,
It
yeah.
wasn't great, but he had some moves, right? His hold-up play particularly was something that you could always rely on Josie for. We didn't see that from DK over the course of this tournament. And so, in fact, it's a question about our number 9. I still, for my money, it's still Josh Sargent. Even though he didn't have a good Nations League, nobody really claimed his spot and said, I deserve it. So I think DK's stock went down.
His stock and his value. I mean, if you've got $15 million to spend on a striker, are you really gonna call Daryl DK after that?
Well, he was never worth that. That was just
Whatever his value
It
is.
was crazy that they even put that out there, because the thing with DK is I got a lot of hate last semester when I kept insisting on this topic. Right? Everyone was like, "No, he's scoring goals for Bar." I'm like, no, guys, you got to actually watch him. I've watched him so much. Please try. And people kept hating on him. Now it's just mainstream at this point. It's just
Yes.
He's useful. Let's put it that way. He's actually very useful for the team, and he might make the roster. He brings something different, but yeah, it's what Pete said there too. As much as we make fun of Josie and talk about how his time is done, Josie was a more technical center forward, and there's not even a debate there.
No.
Not even.
No.
My second stock down. Am I allowed to say Jackson Yu?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going for the easy one then. Jackson Yu's stock's down. He, among the fan base, I think his stock was already as low as it can get. Everyone wanted him out, but I think towards the end, Gregg stopped playing him. So if we look from a Gregg perspective, his stock went down, and he might be done for the time being in the national team. He might come back in the future, but it seems like maybe in September we might not see Jackson Yu.
Yeah. Look, some people will say, well, Jackson Ewell was there because there are no other options, or there weren't other options. Who did you want? Tyler Adams? Look, there were plenty of guys we could have looked at. We could have looked at Leon Flack, who's having a best 11 season for Philadelphia Union. We could have seen Owen Otasawi. We could have seen Tanner Tessman. Yes, I know he moved to Venezia, but so did Busio. So this idea that he moved there were other options that we could have brought. Heck, we could have brought Julian Green. I know that was his club didn't want him to go, but he wanted to be there, and Gregg wanted him. I disagree with Gregg on that one. I think Gregg should have put his foot down. We rarely ever, if ever, call him up, and this was the last chance to get a look at him before World Cup qualifying. But my point is, there were alternatives to Jackson Ewell. He didn't need to be brought. That's 3 tournaments in a row now where he was bad: the Olympic qualifying, Nations League, and Gold Cup. And I think it'd be over for now for Jackson. Sam, your second one.
My second one is going to be a guy that is not in the U.S. men's national team, but is sort of related, and that is Tata Martino. Because for months and months and months, we heard about U.S. could have hired Tata. Tata's so great. Tata is gonna take Mexico to the promised land, and then for 2 consecutive tournaments, the U.S. are able to beat Mexico. Now, I'm not going to sit here and argue whether Tata is a better coach than Gregg or anything like that, of what would have happened had the U.S. gone that direction. All I'm saying is that the stock that a lot of U.S. men's national team fans had for Tata Martino has gone down, and you don't hear that name spoken in a U.S. men's national team context since about Sunday.
Yeah, I think Tata's a victim of his rosters, honestly. I think he's struggling with an aging player pool.
The question we have to ask is, in the both matches that we had with L3, did Gregg outcoach Tata Martino?
I would say in the Gold Cup, yes. But in the Nations League, no.
I always wondered in the Nations League, like, everybody knew that Tim Ream was an issue out there, yet the first winger that Mexico had out there on the right was Antuna.
Antuna, yeah.
And Antuna didn't really run at Ream the way that Lainez did whenever he came in the game. Like, Antuna had a lot of early crosses. And I was wondering the whole game, Lozano stayed in that left channel for much of the game. Like, why didn't you switch Tecatito in? Why didn't you tell Lozano to attack down that channel and go at Ream? And it wasn't until he brought in Lainez that they really started exploiting that. And that wasn't until the 76th minute or something like that. So I if I was a Mexico fan, which I'm not, of course, I would be asking those questions of Tata, like, why did you wait so long to bring him in?
Remember, their strategy in the first half, a lot of the times, was to press the young Mark McKenzie, and it worked quite often. It got them a goal, but they were pressing McKenzie He seemed nervous, and that seemed like what they did in the first half. But yeah, I understand your point too. I think he tried to exploit also a tired Tim Ream. He was already not functioning already when he was fresh. And then Linus, go there, get this guy, get this
Well,
old man.
the thing too is they were playing into that channel for Antuna to go 1v1 against Tim Ream, but Antuna is not that good. You know, when
Yeah,
Mexicans
it was
talk
really
about
weird.
Antuna as being like one of their young,
He's a
up and
pace
coming.
merchant. Just has
Yeah, he's a
pace.
24-year-old guy. His crossing is not great. You know, like Linus came on and was an electric in that same position. I still think Tata outcoached Gregg, because I think that we got a bit of a fortunate penalty, you know, and I just don't think that we were able to create much on the night. So in the Nations League, I'm going to say Tata, but in the Gold Cup, I think Gregg very clearly outcoached Tata.
So
Yeah,
1-1.
and probably in the big picture too, because so many of the Mexican players were so tired at the end. I guess they didn't rotate quite as much as we did, or I don't know the whole. I didn't watch all their games, so
Well, that's something that we have to talk about too, right? Mexico's exhausted. Like Hector
yeah.
Herrera played a full season with Atletico Madrid, and then he played Nations League. They got 1 week off, and then they played 2 friendlies, and then all of Gold Cup. And now, what is he? He has to go with
Yeah.
Atletico. He's probably not going to get much of a break. And if he does, is he going to be ready for World Cup qualifying in like 3.5 weeks? I think there are a lot of Mexican players going to be exhausted after this rough summer because they had to pull double duty. And one area where I 100% agree with Gregg was resting the first team for Gold Cup. I think that was one of the smartest moves he made this summer.
It looks a whole lot better now.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with my, stock down is Zach Steffen. Zach Steffen started this summer as our undisputed number one. There was not really a question about it. Nobody was saying Ethan Horvath should be our number one. You know, there was some Matt Turner stands out there, but it was not widespread. And now Zach Steffen is one of three. And that's partially on Zach for some, errors that he made during the tournament, but it's partially also on the amazing performances of Horvath and Turner. You know, we have three goalkeepers that I have no problem going into World Cup qualifying with as our three. But now Zach Steffen is one of the three, not the one, All right, let's move into stock up. 6 players who improved their stock. Sam, why don't you start us off this time?
We touched on this a little bit earlier, but I don't think anybody improved their stock more over the Gold Cup than Josh Sargent. And it wasn't for anything that he did out there. It was just seeing DK just not live up to that expectation that we had coming in. And then Giassi Zardes, I mean, to make matters worse, if that's the player that you're being compared to, and we all know like the limitations of Giassi Zardes, it really shows that even though we didn't get a whole lot of Josh Sargent in the Nations League, at least we got something out of him. We got the pressure and the running and the defense and the save and the Honduras goal with the back of his head and all that. So for me, Josh Sargent, biggest winner.
Awesome. Filippo.
I think Matthew Hoppe. He's one of the stocks up for sure, because the thing with Matthew was many were questioning whether he just had a hot streak on Schalke. He got lucky and got a hat trick. But he had also sparks of talent in a very tough league on one of the worst Bundesliga teams in Bundesliga history. That was one. It might have been the worst campaign actually ever, and he was still able to perform. He showed that he can perform in Bundesliga. Comes into Gold Cup, doesn't get minutes at first, and as soon as he plays, he shows this spark, this attitude, and not just that. He shows to be above all players in this competition, in the U.S. at least, right? There were other technical players, but from the U.S. players, way above everyone technically, beating mans off the dribble, creating plays. And that Clint Dempsey attitude that we all love because we miss Dukes very much, right? So I think his stocks went up. To me, he very much deserves a call up for the A squad now and an opportunity to play. Maybe as a 9 starting, he most certainly earned it.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was really sad. We never got to see him as a 9, and that's down to the roster construction. We had so many 9s and so few wingers. Same with Joe Aquini. Joe Aquini, people sleep on him because he plays for Cannes, but the guy has 3 goals and 2 assists in about 250 minutes for the U.S. So I think personally he's a center forward, and I think he's a lot more technical as center forward than some of our other options. And it's a shame we didn't get to see either him or Hoppe as center forwards because I think both of them could be options there. But that's down to roster construction, which we've discussed. My first stock up is a position, not a player, and it's a player, but in the specific position. It's Gio Reyna as a central attacking midfielder. I think what we've seen more than ever, we saw in Nations League that he's probably our best attacking player right now. And also we saw our lack of ability to create in midfield, you know. So I'm going to say Gio Reyna as a central attacking midfielder. We don't have guys like him who can see and play the game in a 360-degree way like he can. And for everybody who thinks he's not good defensively, I'm going to push back on that. I think he has been in the past, but I think in the Nations League, I saw him doing a lot of really good defensive work, and I would have no problems about putting him as an attacking mid.
I want to add to what you said there too. Something that we criticized Gregg earlier in the stream about him being flexible with tactics, but not with the system, right? And here comes one thing to point out right away. We've never seen Gregg put a system or a formation where we have a true 10. We haven't seen it. So that's inflexibility with the system, and that is a problem because we have a few players that could play the 10 role, some very promising players. You just said one, Gio Reyna. We have Caden Clark that can play there eventually. So it would be nice to see a 4-2-3-1, something like that, or a 3-5-2 with a 10. You can do that with a 3-5-2. And Gregg has been reluctant to use a 10 for some reason, for whatever reason.
Right.
I have a strong. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I have
ahead,
a strong feeling that we're going to be seeing a three-man back line in qualifying, just because of some of the roster issues that I see us going in there with. So I think that Gio will be moved into that central location one way or another. But I also see the players coming up, and I mean Conrad De La Fuente, the way he's been playing in the preseason, he's going to. I feel like he's going to be part of this national team sooner rather than later. And then once that happens, what do you do with your four wingers? You know, you have Brendan Aronson and Gio Reyna who can both potentially play centrally. You have Tim Weah who potentially can play up top. I don't think any of those players are going to get dropped. So I think we all agree that Conrad looks the part at the moment. So what's going to happen when that happens?
For sure. I agree, Sam. Let's go into the second stock up. Filippo.
Tyler Adams.
All right. Explain.
Without playing. The thing is, we saw this in Nations League. And look, even if Acosta maintains a good level, hopefully he does, I still have some questions in regards to Kellen Acosta, regardless of his masterclass performance against Mexico. Tyler Adams, during Nations League, we saw his importance without him playing, and then we saw it against Costa Rica, which wasn't the best game to judge for sure. But essentially, he's one of the players that we would miss the most right now when we don't have him, right? I mean, if we don't have Reyna or Pulisic, one of them, it's a big deal. But you kind of named a few players that still perform pretty well, and we wouldn't feel it. So Pulisic leaves, and we put Brendan Aronson. It's a big downgrade, but Brendan's still a good player. We can count on Brendan. Conrad De La Fuente coming up. Reyna comes off. You put Tim Weah. You can count on Tim Weah. It's a different type of player. Tyler Adams comes out, and you put. Right now, we only have Acosta, if we're going to be honest about it. We don't
maybe James Sands. Maybe
James Sands, which we still need a test, right? So we don't have a player that we can put in there like Brendan or Weah that we're going to like, okay, this guy might not be in the same level, but he's not going to hurt the team.
Right.
So Tyler Adams' stock is up because he might be our most valuable player. Not our best, but most valuable.
Let me ask you something, Filippo. If we do switch to a three-man back line, does that lessen some of the desperate reliability that we have on Tyler Adams in that sixth position?
Well, if we go to three in the back, we might not even play at the six. We might play with dual eights or dual sixes, and Tyler will still be our ball-winning midfielder, right? If Weston's with him, you need to give Weston that freedom to be Weston, right? Weston's a goal-scoring midfielder. That's what I like to call a goal-scoring box-to-box. So I think Tyler Adams still will have the same defensive duties, pretty much. He just might have less connector duties, I guess, because you might have more midfielders. But defensive-wise, it's the same responsibilities for him.
Yeah. Okay, Sam.
Let's see. My other stock up was DeAndre Yedlin. DeAndre Yedlin was a player that was out on an island for a long period under Gregg Berhalter. Didn't see many minutes under him at all. He gets called into the Nations League and actually gets the call in the Mexico game, which shows that Gregg has faith in him in a big-time situation. He puts together a pretty solid performance in that Nations League. I'm not saying that Yedlin's going to be in the in the World Cup qualifiers roster. I don't I honestly I doubt it. Honestly, I kind of have him at number 4 right now, but I do think that his stock came up tremendously, and he's at least back in the picture now for Gregg.
I like
Yeah,
that pick.
I agree. I'm going to go with low hanging fruit for mine, Miles Robinson.
Yeah,
He barely put a foot wrong the whole tournament, scored twice with his head. His distribution in the early part of the tournament was not that good. But I also think that that's because he played it very simple and very safe, and we were relying largely on Walker Zimmerman to step into midfield. Which, by the way, I didn't know he had that in his locker. I never saw it at LAFC. Step into midfield with the ball and create line breaking passes that our midfielders couldn't even do, almost John Brooks esque. But then when we lost Zimmerman, I saw Robinson do that more and more. And I don't think he has quite the same range passing wise, but he almost always made the right decision. And his defending, particularly his defending in isolation, which is something,
yeah.
I criticize Brooks for, or even Zimmerman for, is how many times did we see him up against Tajon Buchanan or up against a Haitian defender 5 minutes into the first game?
In
Or,
that Qatar game.
in Qatar, right? And he did not get beat. He does not get beat. He'll use his body, his pace, whatever he has to do. He will not get beat. Now, this begs the question. World Cup qualifying, guys, I want to ask your thoughts. How different is it going to be from Gold Cup and Nations League? Is it going to be a similar level where if you were good in Gold Cup, you're automatically going to be good in World Cup qualifying? What do you think?
Absolutely not. We've
Why not?
seen that. First history's on our side, right? We won Gold Cup, and we didn't make it to the World Cup. That's the first thing. But the thing is, it's something we even talked about before, Pete. I think in your channel we even talked. The thing with World Cup, at the end of the day, a lot of it has to do with money, right? World Cup, there's more in stake, money and dreams. A lot of these
Yeah.
players dream on playing a World Cup, along with the money that comes with it, right? So the coaching staff as well, the preparation of a team is better, the tactics will be better, the scouting will be better, the physicality. Plus, it's going to be everyone's A squad. They're going to bring their A game, and we're going to see some dirty CONCACAF games away. We've seen that in the past. It's not going to change. It's the same old CONCACAF.
Yeah.
And it's a whole different level. The carrying is bigger, and the
Yeah.
opponents will be more prepared as well, and the intensity as well.
What do you think, Sam?
I think there's some stuff that's going to transfer over. The belief and the confidence. I think a lot of that's going to come. I think the experience that guys like Gio Reyna got and maybe Miles Robinson got, having their real first international competitive games, assuming that, but I'm assuming that Miles Robinson is going to be a part of the qualifying group. But of course, so much is going to be different. If you're Miles Robinson and you're playing it out of the back and you had a line-breaking pass to, say, Paul Areola, there might be a different outcome if that guy's Gio Reyna, right? So, like, the options on the field change a lot for you. And like Filippo said, the quality that we're going to see and the intensity is just going to go up 6 notches compared from Gold Cup to Nations League, particularly when these players get their first taste of qualifiers away. Because remember, there's only a handful of players that have ever played in a qualifier game on this roster and this player pool. So there's going to be, it's going to be all new. It's going to be a lot of new stuff. But I think we've done a good job this summer of at least giving the players a taste of what they might experience so that they'll be a little bit more confident going in.
And guys, it's just a month away. I can't wait to see how we do. Sam, Filippo, thanks a ton for joining me to do this summer breakdown. It was an awesome summer. Sam, so glad to have you on the channel. Let's do this again at some point. Filippo, as always, an absolute pleasure. Guys, if you're watching and you haven't followed either of these guys or subscribed to their channels, do it now. Both of the links are in the description. Any last words, guys?
I just want to say thank you so much for putting this together, Pete. This is really cool. It's something that the comment section has been asking for a lot. I know I get a lot of comments asking for me to collaborate with you too. I do want to say to you guys that I will be having both of these gentlemen on my channel at some point in the future. We've spoken about it. I didn't want to do it during the Gold Cup because I don't really want to talk about so much soccer while we're talking. There's a lot of other stuff about these two guys that I want to delve into. But thank you so much, Pete, for putting this together. Filippo, I'm glad that your manager and your agent and your attorney was able to check all the boxes and allow this to happen. So thank you to both you guys.
Thanks a lot, Sam.
I just want to thank everyone too. Both of you, obviously. Pete and I have been doing this for a while already. We always have a lot of fun. It was fun to have a different perspective, a different person here along with us. Obviously, I hope all the viewers understand that a lot of the times there's logistics here, right? All of us, we have our own job, and then we have this as well. And even today, we had to bump it up a little later for me. So thank you both of you for that as well. But we're most certainly going to do it more in the future. And yeah, we're going to be in Yank Report very soon. And then I'll let his viewers judge who has the better studio.
And that's where we end it, ladies and gentlemen. Awesome, guys. Thanks a ton, everybody. Thanks for watching. I will see you all on Sunday for a live hangout. You guys have a great one. Sam, Filippo, have a great
Later,
night.
guys.
Let's go, Kings of CONCACAF. Take care, guys.